Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up by me, Kendar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing Chapter 82. The attack came out of nowhere. The tunnel had widened until they could stand side by side, and Tibs wondered if this would qualify as a room when he felt the essence above him shift, and before he could work out what was happening, creatures dropped on them. They were numerous and fast, armed with swords and shield. Tibs had a sense of lean stone creatures as he worked with Jacko and Kumdar to create space for Karina and Mez to join in the fight. Even using his bow as a staff, Mez wasn't effective in close range, and Karina only had ranged attacks. Tibs iced the floor, but they didn't fall. A glance as he blocked the sword with his shield showed him they had claws that dug into the ice. The faces were dog-like with sharp fangs, and they sometimes tried to bite him with. We'd still call them doglings. Once the creatures were all destroyed, Tibs let go of water and used his essence to stop his wound from bleeding. Got his breath, then looked at the others. Jackal's stone body was scratched, but they didn't go deep. Karina had managed to keep them at bay, while Mez only had bruises. Kumdar's leg was broken, so Tibs went to him and wrapped it in essence. I need to practice with purity, so I can figure out how to properly heal, and stepped away and channeled water, studying what happened to Kumdar's wrap. It remained as he'd said it. You're bleeding again, Kumdar pointed out. This is why the essence I use on you stays, but on me it changes to whatever element I'm channeling. The ice this wound. Why don't you just switch to purity, heal yourself, and then back? That's not going to be long enough for you to screw things up, is it? It isn't that simple, Karina said, while Tibs focused on going through the rubble instead of acknowledging the archer's tone. It's not just pushing essence in. You clerics will practice night and day before they can get that right. It is unfortunate that watching others struggle to achieve result does not impart the knowledge of how to succeed. I sensed how the clerics healed during the siege, Tibs said, but until I can trust my actions while channeling purity, I can't practice it. Not that he thought how they did it would work for him, if copying how Karina used her elements hadn't before. Then try it now. No, Jekyll replied, taking his sword from the rubble. If something goes wrong and he hurts himself worse, it puts everyone at risk. We stick with what works for now. He looked around. Does anyone know what happened? I think the dungeon's using the same kind of doorway it made for us to bypass floors to keep the creatures out of Tibbs' sensing range, Karina said. Smart woman, Kenny commented. Tibbs considered what Mez said. He couldn't just switch to purity. But he could switch between water and his element easily and without affecting his behavior. The problem was maintaining what he'd made once he switched. He could manipulate outside essence even while channeling a different one. So his problem was how to get his element outside without drawing it from his team. He looked at the broken creatures. They had none left. Once they died, any essence they still had returned to stealth. Not that they had much then. The level of essence they had seemed to indicate how much life they still had. He'd have to remember that going forward. He'd also have to practice pulling his essence out of them a little at a time. Still didn't want him to kill them that way, but he'd have to be okay with just a slight drain. But that didn't help him now. The eyes would crack the instant he had to move quickly, and he'd bleed again. He studied his bracers and their reserve there. Curious, he emptied the one of water essence into his main reserve. The crystal felt like any of those they found empty of reserve, which meant he could put a different element there. He switched to his element and filled it. Going back to channeling water did not affect it. He now had 9 elements he could access, but as soon as he pulled on his element, he was channeling it, and the same as with the others. So it wasn't that easy. But if he had a reserve of his element when he channeled water, shouldn't that give him a wrap? Shouldn't that give a wrap he applied to himself something to remain anchored to once he switched? Was that even how it worked? He melted the ice on his injury and replaced it with a wrap of his essence, focusing on using what was in the bracer. The wrap nearly drained it completely. Working with such a vast reserve, even as low as it currently was, made him forget how much each wrap required. Another reason to get a handle on purity as soon as possible. This was just another version of sensing and manipulating, he told himself. Which he'd already done with Earth. He slowly changed to channeling water, not that it helped. First change to happen slowly. Not that it helped. The change was sudden, and he'd feared he'd lost the sense of the wrap, but once the sense settled, the wrap was still there. He smiled. Just like the wrap stayed when he placed one on Comdar, now that he had a little of his essence still, it remained. He couldn't sense any connection between the reserve and the wrap, but it worked, and that was what mattered. He noticed the silence, and then his friends watching him. You did something, Reno said. He pointed to his no longer bleeding injuries. I found a way around my essence changing when I channel water. Except the bracers. With some of my essence in there, it's staying. I won't be able to make wraps in a hurry, but what I'll make will stay now. Are you sure there's no risk they'll vanish in the middle of a fight? Jekyll asked. No, but I don't have to think about it for them to stay, so it should be fine. Okay, that works for me. Since Karina said the dungeon can drop creatures on us without warning, I want us to... Stone, grinding against stone, came from further ahead. Stop. Started again. And stop. And started. That isn't a door, he said. Sounds like someone's dragging an injury. Jekyll said. One of the doglings? Tibs asked. They're called gnolls, Karina said. They're called gnolls. He corrected himself. Karina shook her head. The dungeon needs to come up with better names. I didn't come up with that one, still protested. Sounds too heavy to be one of those, Jekyll said. And it's coming toward us. I didn't come up with it either, Karina said. It's something another dungeon made, copied. Tibs closed his eyes and rubbed his temple. Tibs? Commodore asked. Sorry, too many conversations right now. Focus on the distant sound. Sounds like there's only one. Are we checking it out? Oh, definitely, Jekyll replied, grinning. If it's big and lumbering, I want to go at it. Let's not get overconfident, Karina said. It could be a decoy. The dungeon has plenty of creatures that can move quietly. Motion. She motioned around them, or just dropped them on us. How many coins did we get from the gnolls? He was asked. 36 silver, as replied, and this sword. Jekyll handed it to Commodore and headed towards the sound. Tibs was alert for any change to the concentration of essence around them as they followed Jekyll. The creature came into view as they went around the bend. It was the height on par with Jekyll, but thicker all around. Blocky, it had no weapon, and instead of raising its feet, they dragged on the ground. What does the dungeon call this one? Miss asked. The not big brute? Or chuckled. Tibs looked up at the lack of response. He isn't saying. Maybe something else got his attention. Hey, dungeon! Jekyll called. You're really going to miss another fight I win against one of your creatures? Tibs. I think it just doesn't want to see this massacre. Or it's busy setting up this ambush, I warned. If you plan on taking it alone, get to it. Jekyll ran at the golem and punched it in the head. He landed 3 solid blows before it started reacting to him. It was too slow, Tibs thought. Jekyll was slower when he was stoned, but nothing like that. It wouldn't stand a chance unless it was tougher than any of the previous one. I think it's a failed attempt, Jekyll called over his shoulder. Page! Smith started yelling as the golem's fist slowly impacted Jekyll's chest. Attention! The impact was powerful enough. Jekyll slipped back a few paces. This doesn't make sense, turned amused as Jekyll threw himself at the creature. What can you sense, Tibs? Focused, trying to tell apart the creature from the rest of the essence around him. There's Earth, my essence, but everything else is too faint to be distinct from here. Maybe Jekyll's right. It can take a pounding, Mez said as Jekyll hit it over and over and barely cracked the stone. The dungeon is well aware Jekyll enjoys hitting its creatures. Umdar said it would create some with that in mind. Fine, but how long are we letting this one go? How long are we letting this go on? The archer asked. He might be having fun, but don't finish that, Reno warned. You've already given the dungeon enough ideas. Oh, Jimmy said casually as Mez's mouth snapped shut. You don't have to worry. You aren't going to be bored for long. The punch made the golem stagger as part of its head flew off. Finally! Jekyll exclaimed. The chunk bounced and landed a few paces away from Tibs. Instead of being jagged, broken stone, the inside was smooth, shaped as if the golem was hollow. This! Jekyll stepped back, moving to turn to them. As the golem turned to follow him, where the stone was missing revealed a face. Skin, not stone, with metal gray eyes and brown hair. Only half her face was visible, but Tibs recognized her. Payan? Jekyll asked, pausing in his retreat. You have no idea, a voice said, coming from her mouth, but not sounding like her. It was slightly deeper. How happy I am you reacted like that. It makes carrying this weight around worthwhile. Who? Jekyll stammered, and Tibs was confused as the fighter. Come on, Jekyll. Where did you think I'd be if I wasn't watching you fight? Stell? Tibs asked, his voice breaking. It didn't sound anything like when he normally spoke. Yes, Payan said, in a way he'd never seen her do. Now, hit me again so I can get out of this. I didn't realize it would be this impossible to break it from the inside. Oh, I am going to pound you into dust for this, Jekyll snarled. Then he was on it. Each punch sending stone flying. Tibbs wanted to look away, but kept staring as Jekyll attacked their old friend hard enough he was going to kill her again. He knew she was dead, that this was just some other creature Sto had made, but each hit against the stone body exposing more of the flesh underneath, or worse, when Jekyll connected with flesh, hurt Tibs. His friend had never fought against her so viciously. We have to stop him, Bess said. That's not our friend, Commodore stated. Then how come it looks like her? The archer demanded. Everything in here is made of stone. Maybe the dungeon didn't kill her and it's just using essence to, I don't know, control her. Jekyll's going to kill her! Jekyll hit the creature and stone went flying. Finally, it said. Now we can have a real fight. Tibbs refused to accept that was Payan. It wore the same armor Payan had on the last time he'd seen her, when she was still mourning Jeff. Mez was right, and this was her. Did he mean Jeff wasn't dead? How about Walter and the other friends he'd lost into the dungeon? That's not Payan, Karina said, her voice cracking. It's just a copy the dungeon made. How do you know? Mez demanded. Jekyll threw himself at the other fighter, but it easily stepped out of his way, and when it hit him, he staggered back. Because Payan would never hit Jekyll hard enough, he'd feel it in his stone body, Tibbs said, making his voice hard. But, Mez trailed off, his voice cracking too. Everything in the dungeon is made of stone. It sounded as if he hoped that he sounded as if hope had been wrenched away from him. I just wondered if there was someone Mez had cared for who had died in the dungeon. That's all we fought until now, Mez said, the sorrow in her voice stated with curiosity. But it's on us for having assumed that's all there would ever be. No one said that would happen. Definitely not the dungeon. It was hardened. We should have known better. Jekyll was trying to strike it, Sto, but Sto was too agile now that he wasn't encumbered by stone. It was like he trained for this moment, or had always lived with the body. this, Miss snarled, and the arrow hit with an explosion that sent Jackal flying back. Hey, that's not fair! Stowe yelled, now in his usual voice that only Tibs heard, as Payan's body burned until it melted away, leaving behind a full set of armor. Tibs, tell Mez he had no business getting involved. I had it, Jekyll yelled, storming in their direction. You have no business shooting it. See? Stowe said. Jekyll feels the same. Business? Mez demanded. That was my friend it used. My friend you were happily pounding on. Happy? Did I fucking look happy? I was going to make this fucking dungeon hurt for using her face like that. I was going to break each and every bone in that flesh sack until it begged me to stop. Okay, that's excessive, Stowe said, sounding puzzled. Jekyll? No! I was going to make it suffer, but Mez had to go and just kill it. Tibs, what's going on? Tibs looked at the empty armor and wiped the tears away. It shouldn't feel this raw. She died months ago. I couldn't stand watching you hit her, the archer yelled. That is enough, Commodore yelled as Jekyll raised a fist. With the words came lethargy, and Tibs sat down. He should fight against it, counter it. But at least not now. But at least now, the pain wasn't as strong. I do not know if turning us against each other is the dungeon's plan, but I will not allow it to happen. I think we made a mistake, Kenny said. I don't understand, Stowe replied. I don't either, but this isn't what we thought would happen. What did you think would happen? Tibs demanded. He couldn't tell if his anger carried through the exhaustion. I thought you'd enjoyed watching a good fight. Stowe said, I thought Jekyll would like fighting with Payan again. She always talked about how she much enjoyed pitting themselves against one another. Why, you're all so angry. She was our friend, Tibs snarled. And you got to see her again. No, we didn't. Tibs got to his feet, the weakness vanishing. I got to watch you in a creature that looked like her. The others were watching. I watched Jackal try to kill her. I watched her die again. I'm sorry, Tibs, he said meekly. I didn't realize it would affect you like that. Are you telling me none of the other teams recognized her? We didn't do this with any of the other teams. She said, this was a special treat for you and your friends. Well, thanks a lot, he snarled. Stowe again, you didn't realize this would hurt us, he said dismissively as he walked by them. Tibs? Stowe began. No! Tibs stopped and looked around, wanting a target for his anger, someone to scream at instead of the ceiling. You don't do this to me and expect me to be okay with it. You know how it hurts when they die, but it still hurts. But I leave it, Stowe, Kenny said softly. I don't think this is something we can fix by explaining ourselves. But the rest of the floor? No one touches that armor, Jekyll ordered, joining Tibs as he retraced their path. I don't want that thing floating around the world. You're giving up loot? Stowe asked, confused. Jekyll, there's so much more for you to forget. Tibs, tell him about all the loot we readied, please. Tibs didn't say anything. He didn't even acknowledge he heard Stowe. This was the best way he knew to hurt the dungeon. Right now, he wanted Stowe to suffer. And this concludes chapter 82 of Stepping Up. If you're enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to read the story, you can do so on Royal Road for free. If you want to read the story a little further ahead than Royal Road, you can do that on my Patreon and support me at the same time. If you want to listen to me do these live, it's on Twitch every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. The links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.